All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. Now I've been going over the retaping the lecture for Murock's HTML5 and CSS3 4th edition textbook. And I'm retaping these for the AWD, or Rankin Application and Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class. And I'm doing that because I had problems with the first round of taping. So I went back and retaped Chapter 1, and now I'm retaping Chapter 2, how to code, test, and validate a web page. So in this chapter, we learn how to create and edit HTML and CSS files. So we learn HTML syntax, CSS syntax. This whole section on brackets in here I'm going to skip. And then finally how to test, debug, and validate HTML and CSS files. So, some of this HTML syntax I've already mentioned to you. I explained to you what the doc type definition or declaration was. In this case, doc is short for document, and it says that the document we're creating is an HTML5 document. I mentioned that HTML is a tag-based language. There's our beginning HTML tag and our ending. They don't show the language attribute there, they show it here. The head section, which is delineated from head and /head tags, that's everything that does not appear directly on the web page. The body, which is in between body and /body tags, that's what does appear on the web page. Here is an example, and it's not really that different from the one that I showed you in the last chapter. In fact, when you look at this, let's just grab it. Let's just grab all this text. I don't know if it's going to let me do this now or not. No, it's evidently not. Boy, I could always do this in the past where I could make copies and it was never any kind of problem. Alright, so edit this code, reload frame. Application, copy. Highlighted copy to clipboard. I don't know if it actually was or not, so let's check. No. What that's actually doing is it's showing the results of what we put in here, but it's not copying over any of this stuff. It's like I said in the past, which made this a lot easier for me working with it. Oh, got it. Nope. All right. Although you can code HTML using lowercase, uppercase, or mixed case, just use lowercase. In fact, I even use lowercase for this doc type statement when I do mine. But you do whatever you're comfortable with as far as that statement goes. The rest of it, make all in lowercase. Again, the doc type declaration indicates that this is an HTML5 document. This whole thing is referred to as the document tree. In fact, in a later chapter, toward the end of the book, more towards the end of the book, we'll talk about the DOM, or the document object model, that gets built for you based off of this. As far as how to code elements and tags, some of the major tags are shown here. Notice first we've got an H1 tag. I mentioned this to you in the last chapter, that H typically does stand for header. So there's an H1, an H2, an H3, an H4, an H5, and an H6 tag. All right, so header 1, header 2, header 3, header 4, header 5, and header 6. The higher the number, the smaller the default font size for the text. Underneath that, you can see there are a couple of there's a paragraph tag, which literally does that. Beginning paragraph, ending paragraph. Beginning H1, ending H1. Empty tags are ones that don't have an ending tag. The H1 has an ending tag. The P has an ending tag, so they're not empty tags. BR, which stands for line break, is an empty tag because there's nothing after it. Image does not have an ending image tag. All right. When you put tags together and you decide to nest them or have a tag within a tag, this has to be on the outside and this on the inside. If you don't nest them that way, so notice we got a P and I, then a P and an I. it probably, believe it or not, will still work. It'll still look okay on the page normally, but when you go to validate the web page, which is what we're going to do later, you'll get validation errors. All right? Talked about attributes a little bit in the last chapter, and I gave you an example of an attribute. The one that we looked at in the last chapter, just to bring it back up again, was we said HTML lang equals en. So the attribute here was the language attribute, and the value of that attribute, which comes after the equal sign, and in this case it's put in double quotes. Single quotes can be used as well. It means that we're using English. All right. So here, this is an anchor tag, and this says that the page we're going to open is contact.html. Here it says title equal click, which I think that provides like a tooltip. So if you put your mouse over it, it'll show you that. And here we are applying a CSS class to this. All right, so here's another one. So here, the tag is the anchor tag. The href, the title, and the class, those are all attributes. Here there's an image tag, and we've got a source attribute and an alt attribute. Here is a Boolean attribute. Now this is kind of important, this thing in yellow right here, because in the past, not too long ago, instead of saying checked like that, if something was Boolean, meaning true or false, you'd say checked equal true or checked equal checked. You don't do that anymore. You just say checked. As we go on and we get into later chapters, we'll talk about IDs and classes in a lot more breadth and depth of coverage. The ID is for a single element on a page, so it can be only used once per page. The class can be used for multiple times on a page. In a nutshell, that's the difference. All right, HTML looks at all white space as being a single character. So in other words, if I were to go in here and I was to come in and start typing, so let's actually put this in here. It's going to look a little goofy, but we'll put it in anyway. So if I came in here and I said, all right, and I started to come in here, I'm not even going to put anything in here, just I'll put in my head section, test. That's all I'm going to put in for my head. But if I came through here in my body section and I put in a paragraph, in fact, I won't even put in a paragraph, but if I put in here J and hit the enter key and a tab E, enter key tab F, enter key tab F, to put my name in, that would actually appear like this. So even though I put it in looking like this, it would actually appear on the page like J space E space F space F. What happens is when you're working with HTML, all right, and you put actual HTML in a body tag, it looks at any white space by default as being just like you hit the space bar. If I wanted these to be on different lines to look just like this, I'd have to put J with a BR tag, E with a BR tag, F with a BR tag, etc. Then it would look like it does here. But without those BR tags, it instead looks like this. All right. If you want to comment out some code, maybe you want to add a comment to explain what you're doing, or you're working on some code that's not working and you want to comment it out, the delineators, you use a less than sign, an exclamation point, minus minus to start a comment, and a minus minus greater than sign to end the comment. So what they're showing in here in yellow on page 53 is how you create comments. So this is a comment that's just explaining what you're doing. This is a comment to comment out some code. Maybe it's not working. And comments are ignored by browsers. All right, some CSS. So if we look at this, here is an example of a CSS style rule right here in mustard color. This says that by default, every H1 tag should have a color or a text color of navy. So H1 is the selector. It's where we're going to apply the tag. Color is the property. It says what we want to do with the H1. We want to take its color property and we want to give it a value of navy. Also notice that when you put comments in here, it's not the less than sign, exclamation point, minus, minus. It's a slash star to start a comment and a star slash to end a comment. All right? So this says our body will have a background color, which is a shade of orange. Our H1 will have this color, and that's a hexadecimal color. That's the amount of red. That's these first two characters, followed by the amount of green, which is the second two characters, followed by the amount of blue, which is the third characters. All right, this says that all H2 tags should be italic, and all of them should have a 3-pixel solid border that's this color. This says that unordered lists that automatically have a list style that looks like this with the black filled in dot instead should have a black filled in square. So these are all style rules. All right, where we have selectors, we have properties, and we have values. All right, how to code basic selectors. And it says here you can use an element type, which is what we looked at before, body, H1, etc. Or you can use an ID, which means that you're going to start it in your CSS with a pound sign. So somewhere on your page you would have ID equal copyright. So where is it? There it is. So that says for this paragraph, it should have a font size of 75% and be right aligned. And it also says that this H1 tag and this paragraph both have a class of base color. So both of them should have a color of blue. So you'll notice there, and again, the H1 tag. So notice the blue there and there. All right. Now let me mention too, and I've said this before, that I am in the middle here of taking the last document that I just worked on and producing it. So when this gets done, my screen will go black for a minute, but that's to be expected. All right, so again, IDs, which can appear only once on a page, start with a pound sign. Classes, which can appear as many times as you want on a page, start with a period. As mentioned, I'm going to skip this bracket section here, which is about through page 70, I think, something like that. Feel free to read that. I'm not at all trying to diminish its importance. However, I'm using Atom, and it just was a decision that I made, be it right or wrong. All right, that gets us down to here. Page 72, how to test, debug, and validate HTML and CSS files. Let's quickly create a file here, get rid of this. In fact, I should be able to grab something. Now, these are student files. I don't want to grab those. So I'm going to say doc type HTML, my HTML tag. I'm going to purposely leave off the lang equal en. I'm purposely leaving that off. I'm going to call this validation test HTML document. All right, and we'll end that head tag, put in our body tag, and I'm going to put in an H1 here. This is a test for validating an HTML file. All right, that's my H1, and I'm going to put a paragraph tag in here, and I'm just going to put some dummy text, some dummy, there's my last one is finishing up. All right, so some dummy text, some dummy text. Now I'm going to take this line, I'm going to copy it about 5 times. All right, now I'm going to save this. I'm going to just save it right to my desktop, and I'm going to call it validation dot, I don't think I spelled that right, validation.html. All right, now if I go and run this, it looks like that. Some dummy text, etc. You can see that if I make the browser bigger, it's easier to see. All right, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of this, and I'm going to go and in here, I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to type in HTML Validator. All right, and I'm going to bring up the validation markup service, tell it I want it to validate exactly what I just keyed in. I'm going to type in check. Notice what it does is it gives me a warning. It says I really should have added right there lang equals en. Now I'm going to add this, and I'm going to put in lang equals en. I'm going to save it again. I'm going to come back into where I just was, remove what was there, and put it back with the lang equal en. Now when I check, notice it's green. No errors or warnings to show. All right, but I'm going to come back in here, just put some errors in on purpose. All right, my head tag, I'm going to leave off that slash. This H1 here, I'm going to make that an H2. Let's see. I'm just going to remove this paragraph tag here. All right, and then I'm going to go and run this again. And you'll notice I start getting a lot of errors. And it says, hey, I saw this H1 and I didn't see anything that went with it, because there isn't anything that went with it. So notice if I change the H1 or the H2 here on the end to an H1, I had 3 errors. If I go and check it again, now I'm down to 2 errors. All right. And it's saying what title head says, well, they're missing something there. So I add that back. I check it again. And now it says they don't have any errors. Technically, I still do because I don't have an ending P tag. All right. I really should put that back in there too. Notice, for example, if I leave off, I'm going to leave off my HTML tag here. And I get it says, wow, it didn't complain, which again is a bad thing. So there are times in here you can leave stuff off and it'll pass. All right? That's not a good thing, but that's just a way that this is set up. Good, bad, or indifferent. Now, that was my HTML. But I'm going to come in here also, and I'm going to go in and add. So I'm going to go and say link rel equals style sheet, href equals, we'll call it valstyle.css. All right, because that's going to be the style sheet for my validation. So it's valstyle. And let's save that right away. I think I saved this right to the desktop, didn't I? Yes, I did. So we'll save this also to the desktop. And I'm going to call it again valstyle.css. And I'll come in here and I'll just add a few things. Color, green, no, I don't want to do it like that. Body, And that's saying for the whole document, by default, I want the background to be gold and the color to be green. And let's say for our paragraphs, we want our font size to be, let's say, 1.5 M. Whoops, I don't know how that happened. 1.5 M's. And let's say for our H1 tag that we want that to, we'll have it be italic. So font style italic. And then finally, we'll add both a class and an ID. So let's add the ID first. We'll call it oh boy, let's go back and look at this. What we'll do is we'll add an ID. Let's see. Let's put in a second paragraph. And we'll say ID equals, we're going to call it highlight. All right. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to grab those two lines. Instead of dummy text, I'm going to say highlighted text. All right. So that needs an ID of highlight. So that'll have an ID of highlight. All right. Now, up above, I said that the background was gold and the color was green. I'm going to reverse these. So I'm going to say here, the background is green and the color is gold. All right. I'm also going to add a class. Dot, we're just going to call it, this is a terrible name for something, but I'm just going to call it red. All right, and I'm going to say font color, not font color, just color, color red. All right, so I've got all that. Let's go back to here. Let's add one more paragraph. And we're going to say red text, red text, red text, red text, one more time, red text. So we'll come in here and we'll say class equal red. So let's see if our ID was applied, our class was applied, and all the other stuff that we put in here. So run. Okay, and you can see how it's changed. We've got a gold background with green text, except when we highlighted where we reversed it, and there's our red text. Now, that's not that big a thing here, but what I want to show you is I want to go back to this file that had our CSS in it. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And I'm going to come out, and earlier we went in and we validated, okay? But now I want to go to and validate our CSS. And we go to this jigsaw here. And again, I type in direct input, paste that in, click check. If it's good, it's green. But if I come in and make some mistakes, I'm going to purposely add a couple mistakes in here. Let's call it italic, so that's spelled wrong. Let's call it gren instead of green. All right, so you can see what I did there. Now I'm going to come back, copy it again, go back into here. It just worked, but now I'm going to remove what was there and put in the stuff that's in error. You can see gren right there, and you can see italic. Now when I go to check, notice it tells me I found errors. There is no font style called italic. there is no background color called Gren. All right, so it has not validated cleanly. But if I come back and change it again, all right, and let's make another change too. Let's say for this H1 we also want, not that. Let's say that our red paragraphs, we also want them to be bold. So I'm going to say font, weight, bold. All right. Hopefully you notice when we looked at this, that is not bold right now. All right. So I'm going to come back and run it again. Oops, you don't run the CSS, you run the HTML. And now that text is bolded. So when we saw it there, it's not bolded. When we saw it again, it is bolded. Now, this is the old version. Notice what happens if I refresh. It's bold. All right. So what I just very quickly showed you right there was how to create a simple HTML file and then validate it, how to create a simple CSS file and then validate it. All right, so that's what we just did here. All right, when we found errors, when we ran it, we were testing it. When we found errors, we started to debug it to try to figure out what our errors were. So we validated the HTML document. You already saw that. You saw how we did it. We brought up the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. That's what W3C is. Markup validation service, which is under https://validator.w3.org. You can do this different ways. You can give it the URL for a file or a URI. I just like to choose the direct input and copy it right in here. We click check, and then it will show us whether or not our document was valid. And it mentions that having a valid document can improve your search engine optimization. Validation can also help you find errors that you might not have even known existed. All right, so here was some examples. Then we went in and did the same thing with our CSS. Again, there we went to https://jigsaw.w3.org/css-validator/validator. And we saw both a clean validation and a validation where we put some errors in. It says validation not only ensures that your code is correct, it can also help you find errors that you may not otherwise have been aware of. So that's it for this chapter. I believe that my lectures for Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 were okay. So after this particular lecture here, after this lecture gets produced, I'll put everything that I have for the class so far out on my YouTube channel. All right, let's very quickly look at the summary. So we talked about the doc type declaration. You should know what that is. The root element is basically it's the top. So it's your HTML tag. You know that HTML is tag based. Most tags have an opening tag and a closing tag that look almost the same, sometimes the same, except the closing tag has a / before it. We looked at attributes like the lang equals HTML. We looked at how to make HTML comments. We looked at how to make CSS comments. We talked about white space, and white space is defined as tabs, line returns, and spaces that you put in. What I did not mention, and I showed you this before, where is it? I don't know if I still have it. Probably not. But again, just to show you this, let's put in another paragraph. Not worrying about validating or anything, but again, F. All right. Now, I've mentioned this to you before, but I want to show it to you now. All right. So notice that when I do this and I launch it. There's Jeff with the blank spaces, just as I told you it would be. All right, and I'm going to put that paragraph in one more time, but this time, after every one of these, I'm going to put in a BR tag. After the J, after the E, and after the first F. And notice the difference then. Now, it puts each letter on its own line. Mentioned that before, but now it's been demonstrated to you. All right? Let's see. All right. We talked about CSS style rules. I showed you several. Okay? We talked about properties and values. We talked about CSS comments. I skipped the whole thing in here on brackets. Feel free to read it at your leisure. Feel free to use brackets if you'd rather use brackets than using Atom, which is what I'm using. All right. They said it's best to start with a template. We'll get into that later. You saw how to test an HTML file for validation, how to validate both an HTML and a CSS file. All right. So again, I believe that my lectures for Chapter 3 on how to use HTML to structure a web page, and for Chapter 4, which was on how to use CSS to format the elements of a web page, those are both okay. All right, so hopefully I'm all caught up. Thanks.